Ryse, Son of Rome. I remember when this game was released back in 2013. Everyone, myself included, was absolutely blown away by the graphics. Even today, people still compare this game to newer ones, and to be fair, when compared to Forspoken, this one is leagues better. Ryse, Son of Rome launched alongside the Xbox One. In fact, it was the console's launch title. Because of that, we all know that some content had to be cut to meet the console's release deadline. The goal was to just try, to compete with what became one of the most successful PS4 games at the time. Ladies and gentlemen, the legendary Knack! We'll have a video discussing this little monster later, but today our focus is on what could have been a great Xbox franchise, one that might have even surpassed God of War. Instead, Ryse only had one game and is remembered primarily for its graphics. The way this game was introduced wasn't ideal. We got a glimpse of it during one of the worst presentations of a new-gen console. I am talking about the infamous Xbox One review. The TV disaster. And let's not forget the stick with the 360 moment. Ironically, they weren't entirely wrong. Today, physical game releases on PlayStation and Xbox are dying, and most people use these consoles as entertainment hubs, all in one box. Get it? Xbox One. And then there was the online requirement. If you wanted to use your console properly, you had to be connected to the internet for updates. In hindsight, they were predicting the future, just with a few missteps, like the Kinect thing, and the no boring physical games controversy. By the time Ryse was finally released, Xbox had already pivoted back to a more Xbox 360-like strategy. I was just a kid back then. My parents and I were at a store where this game was being sold, but I didn't own an Xbox One. In fact, I didn't even have an Xbox 360 at the time. My parents made me a proposition. Why don't we buy this game for you now? And we'll get you an Xbox One later. I can't remember exactly what went through my mind at that moment, but I thought about it and thought some more, and ultimately, I declined the offer. I still wasn't sure whether I wanted a PS4 or an Xbox One. Just like that legendary episode of The Big Bang Theory where Sheldon faces the same dilemma. Looking back, I am glad I made that choice. Not just because of my opinion on today's game, but because if I had accepted the offer, I wouldn't have gotten a PS4 to play Marvel's Spider-Man and then watching Spider-Man Far From Home back then, and if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have met a friend on X who introduced me to the girl that would later become my wife, and together we would find Christ. So Ryse, you may not have been the game I played, but in a strange way, you played a small role in the bigger events of my life, and for that, I'm glad I declined the offer of playing you. But after more than 10 years, I finally finished this game, with my wife watching me play it. And I'm here to tell you, is the game even good? I know Ryse, Son of Rome holds a special place in the hearts of some Xbox fans because of everyone has a personal connection with certain games. I am going to start with the most controversial aspect of this game. It has fancy graphics, great voice acting, and even uses some impressive technologies that I will discuss later. But what about the heart of the game? The gameplay. This game is well known for being repetitive and feeling more like a tech demo than a fully realized experience. I do recognize its repetitiveness, but I want to dive a little deeper into this topic. The combat, while decent, remains virtually the same from the beginning to the end of the game. It's fun, but it lacks any real combo system, which makes me wonder, why would someone without hyper-focus play this game for more than 20 hours in a multiplayer mode that offers the exact same combat as the base game? That said, I will focus on the main campaign, as I didn't even touch the multiplayer to be fair. The combat relies heavily on quick-time events, but not in a good way like the classic God of War games or Dante's Inferno in certain sections. I do love quick-time events, but I don't love what this game made with these quick-time events. Because of this, the game never develops any meaningful combo mechanics. The skill tree is basically just deal more damage, gain more health, kill enemies faster, and etc. You walk and run between combat sections, and while the combat works well enough, it doesn't evolve. The finishing moves are satisfying, and though you see the same animations repeated a lot, that didn't bother me so much. What did bother me was the lack of variety in enemy models. You often find yourself fighting 3 identical fat guys at once. If they wanted barbarian warriors with nipple armor, they should have at least made 2 variations of them. To be fair, there are slight changes in some chapters monsters where enemies wear different outfits, which made me think, that's not so bad at all. But after playing a few more hours, everything felt the same again. The camera can be slightly annoying during fatalities. I call them this way because it's easy to remember. But honestly, it didn't bother me at all. Believe me when I say that camera issues in video games don't usually affect my experience. Even in games people hate for bad camera angles like Spider-Man 3 on PS3, I played through the whole game and enjoyed it just fine. The quick time events? Yeah, sure, they can be frustrating, but the camera? Not a problem for me. If you are someone who does get bothered by these issues, keep in mind that Ryse can be a bit annoying in some specific moments, but don't let that ruin the experience, just enjoying the spectacle of the killing spree. One major issue with the combat is the lack of a lock-on mechanic. You often find yourself missing an enemy right in front of you because the game randomly targets another one instead. However, I have to acknowledge that this was more of an industry standard at the time. The lock-on feature didn't become widely popular until the middle of that console generation, so it wasn't something every game had in 2013. That being said, Ryse does have one mechanic that later became a staple in action games: the parry system. The parry works well, and in boss battles, by the way, all of them are good, you rely on it heavily. However, the boss fights end up feeling too mechanical. The pattern becomes attack, attack, wait. Parry, attack, attack, wait some more, then parry some more. It doesn't quite give you that exhilarating feeling of being a warrior with unleashed Roman power. Instead, it turns combat into a timing-based sequence, which wasn't as engaging as I had hoped. What really made me feel like a centurion besides the combat was the great implementation of mechanics that made me feel more like a leader than just a pawn in this war. You can form a shield wall to advance through areas with archers, fighting back alongside your legion. This is a nice touch because that type of formation was one of the most effective tactics in ancient warfare. In real life, legions adapted to strict paths with formations of 8 soldiers, quickly assembling and dismantling their shield walls. Here, you get to control that formation yourself. Not only that, but you also have access to ballistas, and since this is a video game, you can fire them as much as a semi-automatic weapon, though in reality, they could only shoot about 4 arrows per minute. Alongside this general feeling of command, you can also issue orders to your soldiers, which can benefit you in different ways. For example, if you command your troops to attack from the right side, you receive support from ballistas. If you attack from the left, archers will assist you. It's nothing too substantial, but it's a nice addition that somewhat compensates for the shallow but still functional combat system. It improves the gameplay loop, but doesn't necessarily make it great. While my wife was watching me play, she mainly focused on the story. She told me that this game deserved better treatment, more development time to create a better overall experience. While I agreed with her, I always responded with the same thought: if they wanted that, they should have made the gameplay mechanics better. From my perspective, the gameplay loop isn't very engaging. The most enjoyable part for me was realizing that the game was relatively short, because if it had been longer, it would have become tedious. I liked the gameplay, but I didn't love it. In fact, part of the reason I liked it was because it wasn't long enough to become boring. To me, it was a decent game, but not one I'd revisit solely for the gameplay. Ironically though, if I were to return to this game in 7 years or more, it would be because of the gameplay. Because the other aspects of the game, while promising, ultimately left me more disappointed. This made me realize that the strongest aspects of Ryse Son of Rome are its gameplay and graphics. The main issue with the gameplay is its lack of depth. However, the game introduces interesting ideas that make me wonder about its wasted potential, not just for Ryse itself, but for a possible sequel. Imagine something in the style of Ghost of Tsushima, a game that maintains the core aspect fans love it, but explores a different mythology, like Ryse Son of Greece, or Ryse Son of any civilization you can think of. The possibilities are vast. For a launch title, I found its length disappointing, especially considering that back then we didn't have Game Pass to justify playing shorter games. You either paid $40-50 or you didn't play it at all. By today's standards, I think the campaign length is fine, and the game does have additional content, like the online mode but I didn't explore that, as I was only interested in the campaign. And about the campaign, as I mentioned before, the game has some solid boss battles. My favorite was in Chapter 5. It was creative and well executed. The campaign itself feels like a wannabe hack and slash game from the PS3 era, but with next-gen graphics for its time. Sometimes though, those graphics work against it. There are moments where NPCs feel soulless, and some areas lack personality or identity, but I get it. They were still figuring out how to develop games for new hardware. And honestly, if even today we see outdated movements animations like in Avowed, which launched this year, imagine what it was like in the very first wave of Xbox One games. At least the protagonist's movements are well animated, with very few bugs affecting him. As for collectibles, some are comic book style pages that add extra content to the scenes, possibly representing cut content that was repurposed for completionist players. Others are concept art pieces for the chapter you're playing. Beautiful ones. The big elephant in the room is its graphics, and I'm gonna talk about them with you. For its time, far superior to anything else, and that's what mattered, being a showcase of the Xbox One's power. I played on the Series S and felt disappointed by the retrocompatibility of this version. Even on the Series X, there's no FPS boost, no resolution enhancement, and only an auto HDR that works fine. But honestly, I think Microsoft just doesn't care about their older single-player games like Quantum Break, which also has no improvements from the original Xbox One version. In fact, Ryse Son of Rome doesn't even take advantage of the SSD. It's the first game I've played on the Series S that takes over a minute to load. It's weird. The game feels dated, not just in gameplay, but in graphics as well. At times, it looks blurry, preventing you from fully appreciating the details the developers put into it, especially in the Roman cities with their massive buildings. Speaking of them, what I remember most about Ryse is what I already associated with the Roman Empire. The beauty of its architecture, and some environments even feel claustrophobic because you want to see more of the world they've built. You want to explore, but you can't. I'm not saying the game should have been open world, but a more open level design would have given players a greater sense of exploration, rather than just moving through linear corridors to fight the next enemy. Thanks to the Xbox One's power, Ryse was the first time Crytek used film techniques for cutscenes. They even collaborated with Imaginarium Studios, a then new motion capture technology company co-founded by Andy Serkis. Yes, the guy who got beaten by Black Panther. Just kidding. He's Caesar from the Planet of Apes, if you want to know. The fact that the game was filmed like a movie made its visual presentation outstanding. The voice acting is also on point and truly immersive. It's like watching a historical movie. But it is a good movie? We'll talk about that soon. The facial animations were ahead of their time but now feel somewhat dated by today's standards. Despite all the effort put into the cinematography, the world itself feels small, bland, and forgettable. Good graphics alone don't make a game world feel alive. A game doesn't need to be colorful to have so. Look at Days Gone. Even though it's an open world game, it feels more believable than Ryse. Gosh, even Knack, a launch title for the PS4, had a memorable world. And I'm not talking about graphical fidelity, but about something to remember beyond just the impressive architecture of the real life. Like Ghost of Tsushima did. And no, I'm not trying to compare a newer game to older games. No, that's not my point in this. My point is that if I compare with another game experiences I had, Ryse is not so good. Because this is a personal review and sometimes my mind compares one game to another even though they aren't of the same genre of game. But let's talk about the story. The best comes at the end. Besides the good OST that works case by case to give you some chills, it didn't stay on my mind. The story, on the other hand, left a taste in my mouth. Not the best taste, but it's still a taste. The story here is good. In fact, it's the best point about the game despite of that feeling of historical movie I mentioned before. But the taste it left was disappointment. I know it's not an actual taste, but you understand the meaning. I'll give you a brief introduction to the story of this game, and if you don't want any spoilers, skip to this part of the video that is appearing on the screen. Ryse Son of Rome follows Marius Titus, a Roman soldier who rises through the ranks of the Roman legion while seeking vengeance for his murdered family. Set during the rule of the Emperor Nero, the game begins with Marius returning home to find his family slaughtered by barbarian raiders. Driven by revenge, he joins the Roman military and quickly proves himself in battle. And so on The game is about discovering corruption in the Roman Empire and discovering the real culprits behind Mario's family slaughter. The game blends historical fiction with mythological elements. The story is good and has a few great ideas, but the execution isn't the best. It doesn't leave you with a mind-blowing feeling or a sense that the story is being told in a way that evokes emotion. It doesn't explore its mythology well, nor does it deeply explore the themes of corruption or what Rome truly meant to the soldiers. The themes are there, but they only develop it in a more meaningful way by the end of the game, specifically in the final 2 chapters. Before that, it's not bad, but it isn't meaningful either, because you don't fully feel whether the story is trying to go, and the pacing of the narrative isn't the best. It's just a good game with random missions that tie together by the end, much like an episodic series that only connects better near the conclusion. The main character's arc is pretty good by the end, but the build-up isn't the best. They should have given more time to develop it. The ending felt rushed and confusing. The game didn't explain a lot of things and then threw them into your face at the end. A sequel could have helped clarify this. The game doesn't work as an emotional experience, but it still tries to evoke emotion. It just doesn't make you care enough. Ryse Son of Rome is what it is. A game that holds a special place in some players' hearts. But it's not only about the graphics, but it's not a great game either, because at the end of the day, nothing really made sense. But I still enjoyed my time with it. I think it could become a franchise, but I don't think this game should have launched the way it did. It shows passion from the developers, but you don't feel it as much. I wanted to disagree with the idea that the game is a tech demo, but honestly, after finishing it and making this video for you all I can say is it's a mediocre game that's almost a good game because of its good ideas and a few good points, despite its poor execution. Ryse Son of Rome is a 6.5 game at most, for me of course. I play it on the Xbox Series S, and my gamer tag is appearing on the screen if you want to see my gamer credentials, because that's basically what a gamer tag or a PSN ID is. There's another video on the screen right now that I know you love and always remember, so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. I'll see you in the next video, and comment below if you love this game or if you hate it. See you next time.